Welcome again to day 2 on the series Effective Communication, a Marital Serenity 2. On the second day of the series, we shall be looking at how can we actually communicate? What are the pathways to communication? So there are different pathways to communication, and communication in marriage is not exempted. Some of the pathways to communication is 1, the context of the situation. 2, nonverbal expression, which includes your facial expression, your gestures, your behavior, your body language. 3, your emotions. 4, spoken and written communication. And 5, touch. These are the pathways to communication. Usually, we tend to focus only on words, but in the actual sense, this is just but a fraction of the information shared back and forth between couples. Note that you are constantly giving out signals, and these signals are picked by people and interpreted. You may not necessarily need to say a thing to convey a message to your spouse, and that is why your spouse can sense when you're resentful, when you're stressed, when you're angry, when you're happy, and all this determines how your spouse responds to what you're communicating. Avoid sending multiple signals or multiple messages that are contradicting at the same time. You may want to say something else but mean something else through the signal you're saying. You might be saying a thing with a good intention, but your facial expression or your body language contradicts what you're saying. And this, in fact, is the reason why couples conflict and misunderstand each other. Communication in marriage can be complex. This is why you need to learn the art of effective communication, because communication in itself is more difficult than what people perceive or believe ordinarily. It can be quite a task handling and juggling, processing all the information coming at you. But you can do that by trying to be calm. Always try to be calm and take a closer look at the typical fight between you and your spouse. Identify the different types of information you have given out to your spouse during the conflict. Take the findings from this, and intentionally do something about it when next a conflict arises. Remember, conflict in marriage is not a bad thing in itself, so long as you fight fair. So conflict in marriage can actually help to skyrocket growth and to build a healthier bond between couples, so long as you fight fair. Please, by conflict here, I do not refer to violence or abuse, but I am referring to conflict. And yes, it is okay to conflict as a couple, so long as you fight fair. When conflicting, talk about your communication gaps. Talk about the communication problems with your spouse after the fight. Do not talk about the topic of the fight in itself, but try to identify the gaps in your communication that actually made you to misunderstand each other. After you must have identified this communication gap, it becomes easier for you to resolve that conflict because you are more open to apologize or empathize. This can open up a whole lot of new understanding of the problem for both of you. So it is important to evaluate your marriage communication. Is your marriage communication effective? There is one question you need to answer for yourself. There are different types of communication in marriage, and for the purpose of this series, I will be mentioning the verbal and the non-verbal communication. The verbal communication is your ability to express how you feel through the words you speak. Your choice of words, your tone, the volume you use. These three things are very crucial and important when using verbal communication. If you love someone with all your heart, but you do not say it, how will the person know? If you appreciate your spouse, but never speak about it, how then would your spouse know this? Your spouse is not a mind reader. Being able to tell your spouse how wonderful they are will make them feel loved, appreciated, and in touch with how you feel. If you want serenity and you value serenity in your marriage, then you will not take the art of verbal communication lightly. Always, you should be able to speak about your feelings, about the things that make you happy, not just the things you are sad about. So it is important to discuss both feelings in a marriage relationship and in any relationship that ought to be healthy. Communication between married couple is imperative to marital serenity and sanity. The lack of communication in marriage, especially verbal communication, can cause a huge toll on your mental health. Number 2, nonverbal communication. When communicating something in a nonverbal way, it is important to mind your expressions, because we actually communicate non-verbally to everyone we meet, be it friend, family members, or spouse. You need not say a word, but you have just told a story with the way you react or behave, with your facial expression, your body language, and your gestures. So, nonverbal communication includes things like body expression, facial expression, your body movements, your gestures. These are all parts of nonverbal communication. We cannot talk about the importance of effective communication in marriage without outlining verbal and nonverbal communication. These two form a huge part of communication in marriage, because most often it is even the nonverbal communication that causes conflict in marriage. Also, take note that when using both, it is possible to use both at the same time, and most times we use both though. So when using both, you must not allow them to contradict each other. You must ensure that your verbal and your non-verbal communication aligns with the message you are trying to send. For instance, when you lean forward and close to your spouse while trying to discuss an important matter, or maybe you want to say something like "I love you" to your spouse, this naturally makes your spouse to open up. Your spouse will subconsciously feel safe and become vulnerable to you in a good way. When communicating with your spouse with a nonverbal communication, face your spouse and keep your body language open when having a difficult conversation. This helps you to connect with each other. No leg crossing, no arm crossing. Your body should always show your spouse that you are open to hearing what they have to say and you are willing to work through it. This is very important. Here are some of the things you need to avoid with nonverbal communication. Do not turn away from the person speaking. Do not roll your eyes. Do not shake your head in dismay. Do not scroll through your phone while speaking. And do not keep your body posture closed. Always try to leave an open body expression that shows a sign of listening and welcoming. However, it is good to lean forward as an indication of interest in what the other person is saying. It is also very nice to make eye contact. This gives an impression that you are focused on what the person is saying. It is good to nod your head to let your spouse know that you are listening to what is being said. You need to be completely present in the moment, focusing on the dialogue. And lastly, you need to have a relaxed body posture that invites your spouse to listen to what you have to say at any time you communicate. So with this, we come to the end of this series tomorrow. Until I come your way again tomorrow, I remain your Serenity Coach, Chineye Mobi. Bye.